time, Dad. You can't manage on your own.
Sign the papers and we'll handle the house.
You mean sell it behind my back? Over my dead body? This is financial elder abuse. Initiate the hold now.
Administrative hold placed on $200,000. No funds move without your signature, Mr. Burke.
Tripwire set.
He's family, not a dog left on the porch.
My house! My rules!
Dad, stop making a scene.
Good.
Scenes make truth visible.
Sir, place your hands behind your back. You'll regret this.
I regret only the time I stayed silent.
They said, "It's time, Dad. You can't manage on your own anymore." Those words crushed me because behind them was a cruel plan. My daughter and her husband had already arranged to sell my $650,000 home, the house my late wife and I built together. Their greed burned hotter than fire. But they never imagined the very papers they ignored would become my weapon. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in the living room, the late afternoon light slanting through the blinds, painting thin lines across the old oak floor. My eyes wandered to the mantel, where the photograph of Martha in her wedding dress still smiled back at me. That smile had been my anchor for decades. Now it was the only warmth in a house that suddenly felt colder than the November wind outside. I kept hearing the same thought over and over in my head, like a hammer striking the same nail. My own daughter had turned against me. The girl I worked myself to the bone for, the girl I sacrificed so much for, had quietly joined hands with her husband to sell the very roof over my head and shove me away into a nursing home. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, heavier than any illness or age ever had. I thought back to all the years I carried her on my shoulders, both as a child and later as a young woman trying to find her place in the world. I remembered the day I signed the last check for her college tuition, totaling $60,000. Money I could have used to patch the leaking roof or pay down the mortgage faster, but I didn't. I told myself education was the one gift no one could take from her. Then there was the car. $25,000, a silver sedan she begged for when she landed her first job. She promised to pay me back. She never did, and truth be told, I never expected her to. I gave her $10,000 for her wedding, too, writing the check with trembling hands, thinking it would help her start a new life with Rick. I told myself it was worth it because she looked so happy that day. Now I see those smiles differently. Now I wonder if they were already planning this long before. Every sacrifice I made was like laying bricks, and I thought I was building her future. Instead, I realized I was building a staircase she would later use to step over me. I let my gaze travel around the room, to the walls I had painted with Martha, to the wooden floor I lay down on my knees 20 years ago, to the flower garden I had planted outside just for her. This house was not just timber and nails. It was $600,000 of sweat, blood, and memory. It was the home where we raised our child, where we celebrated birthdays, and where we buried dreams when Martha passed. And now to think they wanted to turn it into a number on a check, strip it of its history, toss me out like last week's trash. The thought was unbearable. My heart ached, not just because of the house itself, but because of what it meant. They weren't only trying to sell a building. They were selling the very story of my life, and the story of Martha's, too. The shock of it cut me twice. First, the sharp edge of betrayal. Second, the blunt force of realization that my own flesh and blood had chosen greed over love. I pictured the two of them whispering in the kitchen, papers spread across the counter, planning how much they'd pocket from the sale, which nursing home they'd send me to. The cruelness of it was that they had decided my fate without me. They saw me not as a father, not as a man who gave them everything, but as a problem to be solved. A burden? I had known pain before. When Martha died, my world collapsed. But this was a different kind of death. This was the death of trust, the slow suffocation of love. For a long while I sat frozen in that chair, staring at the fading sunlight, my chest tight with grief. But as the minutes passed, the grief began to harden. The tears that had threatened to spill turned into something else. I realized that if I let myself be buried alive in their schemes, then I was no better than the helpless old man they thought I was. The anger inside me was not just anger, it was resolve. They thought they were clever. They thought I was too tired, too old, too weak to fight back. They were wrong. I was wounded, but not broken. I was heartbroken, but not powerless. Somewhere deep in my gut, I felt the shift, from victim to fighter, from an abandoned father to a man standing guard over his legacy. I rose slowly from my chair and made my way to the study. The drawers were stiff, the wood swollen with years of humidity, but I pulled them open anyway. Old files, yellowing envelopes, the smell of dust and ink rising like ghosts from the past. My hands trembled, not from age, but from anticipation. And then I found it. The life insurance policy Martha and I had secured years ago, her neat signature still there, strong and certain. Beside it lay the deed to the house, my name printed clearly in black and white. I ran my fingers across the page, almost in disbelief. These were not just papers, these were weapons. Proof that the house was mine, proof that no amount of plotting or scheming could erase what Martha and I had built. I clutched them to my chest, feeling her presence in the quiet room. The evening shadows grew longer, and the house creaked in the silence. I looked again at Martha's photo, her eyes sparkling the way they always did when she believed in me. And I whispered, so soft it was almost just a thought. "Don't worry, Martha. I won't let them destroy our home. I won't let them erase you." Saying it out loud gave me strength, like she was still here, urging me forward. The house around me seemed to breathe again, the walls steady, the floor firm beneath my feet. I knew then that the fight was only beginning. They thought they could steal from me in silence, but I had just uncovered the one truth they had overlooked. I was still standing. I still had the power. And when the time came, I would use it. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I woke up before the sun, the house still and bluish with that quiet hour before the heat kicks on. Coffee hissed into the pot, and I stood there, watching the thin stream like it could steady my hands. It did, a little. I set Martha's photograph on the kitchen table, the one where she's in that yellow sweater, laughing at something I once said. I told her good morning. I told her I needed her steadiness. Then I carried the cup into the living room and laid out the papers I'd found last night. The life insurance policy, the deed with my name in bold, the property tax receipts, the mortgage satisfaction letter. These were more than papers. These were the bones of my life. I pressed my palm flat on the deed until my breathing matched the slow tick of the wall clock. I called Thompson as the clock hit 8. He answered on the first ring, the way good lawyers do when they decide you're a priority. His voice was calm, a little gravelly, always 3 steps ahead even when I was stumbling in place. I told him what I'd discovered. I told him my daughter and her husband had set a plan in motion to sell my house and tuck me away. I told him about the savings. He listened. He didn't rush me. When I finished, he said something simple that clicked like a deadbolt sliding home. "Frank, this is financial elder abuse. We can act now." He walked me through it, step by step, using words I could hold on to. Protective measures, temporary holds, written notices. He said there was a joint savings account that Karen once convinced me to open for emergencies. And I felt shame tighten my shoulders because I remembered her smile that day at the bank. I remembered signing because she said it would make things easier. Thompson said we would freeze it. $200,000. He repeated the number, and then he said it again like a doctor reading vitals. I permitted him. He drafted a letter while I stayed on the line. He read it out loud so I could hear the strength in it. State statutes, penalties, demand to freeze transfers, and withdrawals. He emailed it while we spoke. He called the bank's legal line and put me on 3-way. A woman named Delgado confirmed receipt. Her voice had that clipped efficiency that only happens when people understand they're touching something serious. "Mr. Burke, I've placed an immediate administrative hold on the $200,000 joint account pending verification, she said. No funds will leave without your signed authorization. You'll receive written confirmation by the end of the day. I thanked them both. I sat very still after the call ended. A bird landed on the snow-dusted railing outside and shook itself. The furnace kicked on. The house exhaled. I looked up at Martha's photo and said it out loud, firm and even. "The money is safe, honey." Saying it made me feel bigger in my own skin. I wasn't a problem to be solved. I was a man taking steps. I put the deed into a leather folder and zipped it shut. Time to go to the bank in person. I dressed in my warm coat and the scarf Martha knitted during the winter when Ethan was born. The sky was a pale sheet, the kind that threatens snow but holds back for hours. My old Chevy started on the second try. I drove past the deli where Martha and I used to split a tuna melt on Fridays, past the park where Karen learned to ride a bike, and I ran behind her with my hands out, ready to catch her if she fell. The memories did not soften me. They gave me directions. I pulled into the bank's lot and parked next to a mound of plowed snow stained with road grit. Inside, the warmth hit my cheeks. Holiday wreath on the door. A tiny tree on the counter, tinsel clinging to the pens. Delgado met me near the manager's office. Her handshake was firm and dry. She had kind eyes that didn't oversell kindness. "Mr. Burke, let's review your documents," she said. We sat in a glassed-in office. People moved like shadows through the frosted strip along the window. I laid the deed on the table. I laid the mortgage satisfaction letter down. She tapped at her keyboard, looked up the county records, and brought up the scanned instrument showing the chain of title back to the day Martha and I signed. "The title is clean," she said. "There's no transfer, no lien, nothing recorded since the satisfaction in 2013. You're the sole owner." "Can they try to file something without me?" I asked. "They can try," she said, "but we will notify you of any attempt flagged as suspicious. With your attorney's letter on file, we have an internal alert set. Think of it as a tripwire." Tripwire. I liked that word. It sounded like the kind of thing a man sets at the edge of his land to protect it when he sleeps. I signed 2 forms, one confirming my contact preferences and another giving Thompson access to speak on my behalf for this matter. Delgado printed me copies. On my way out, she said, "You did the right thing, Mr. Burke." I nodded. My throat felt tight, but not with sadness, with purpose. I drove home the long way, past Karen's subdivision. I told myself I wasn't spying, just measuring the distance between what used to be and whatever came next. The house looked neat, tasteful. A wreath on the door, 2 rocking chairs on the porch that nobody ever sat in. I pictured Rick in that kitchen, leaning on the counter, telling Karen how easy it would be, how old men don't argue, how signatures can be persuaded. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. I kept driving. At home, I set the bank copies on the kitchen table. I ate a bowl of soup standing up. I felt calm and almost empty, like the air had washed me. Then my phone buzzed. "Karen." My thumb hovered. I answered and kept my voice even. "Dad, we need to talk," she said. Soft, practiced, like a nurse preparing a needle. "Rick and I have been thinking about your well-being. These winter months are hard. We found a wonderful place with a garden, activities, and full-time nursing staff. It's more like a community. You would love it." The words were honeyed. The core was poison. I told her I appreciated her concern. I kept it slow. "What's your plan for the house, Karen?" I asked. A beat, then light laughter, the kind that means, "Don't worry, Daddy, I've got this." "We'd manage it for you. Maybe sell it because, it's a lot to keep up with and the money would help with your care. Rick can handle the paperwork. You don't need to stress." There it was, the we, the manage, the future tense that didn't include me. I pictured the check, the real estate agent with a smile too wide, my life reduced to a line item under proceeds. I kept my voice level. I told her I had already spoken to my lawyer. I told her the savings account was frozen. I told her I had the deed. I told her any attempt to transfer or encumber the house would trigger notices and consequences. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't scold, I simply set the facts down like bricks. Silence. Then a small, sharp inhale. I could hear the other tone now, the one that had been hiding. Not concerned, not love, irritation. "Dad, you're overreacting," she said. "We're trying to help. You know you can't take care of the place much longer. Winters are dangerous, stairs are dangerous. Let us handle it." "You mean let you sell it?" I said. "The place your mother and I built, the place I paid for plank by plank, the place is worth $600,000, not counting what it holds." The mask slipped. I heard it, a thin edge in her voice. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Rick knows people. He can make things simple." "I prefer complicated," I said, "especially when simple means me out." She sighed. The heavy, put-upon sound of a person denied the shortcut they expected. "We'll talk later," she said, and hung up. I stood there with the phone cooling in my hand. A chessboard formed in my mind. I saw the moves. I saw the traps. I saw how hurt had to become a strategy. I put on my coat and checked the folder once more. Time to stop letting them declare the setting. Time to pick the ground. Thanksgiving had crept closer while I was busy surviving. The calendar said the big meal was that afternoon. Karen had invited her church friends. She hadn't invited me. I drove anyway. The roads were slick with powder, the sky a low lid. As I turned onto her street, the houses glowed with that holiday warmth that makes strangers feel welcome. The sight made my stomach twist, because welcome is a word that has to be lived, not framed. I parked by the curb behind Rick's truck. Music floated from the house. Laughter, too. I got out and pulled my scarf up. That's when I saw him. Ethan, my grandson, on the porch. No coat, just a long-sleeve shirt, jeans and shoes wet with slush. He sat on the top step with his arms wrapped around himself, his shoulders shivering with that deep cold that soaks into bone. His lips were pale. Steam rose from his breath in thin threads. My heart lurched so hard I had to grab the railing. I walked faster than a man my age should on ice. "Buddy," I said, my voice low so I wouldn't startle him. "What are you doing out here?" He lifted his head. Relief and shame fought in his eyes. "I'm not allowed in right now," he whispered, his teeth clicking. "I burned the turkey. Rick said I needed to think about my actions." I took off my coat and wrapped it around him. He tried to protest. I wouldn't hear it. I tucked the collar up under his chin and pulled him to his feet. His legs wobbled. I steadied him. I could hear clinking silverware through the door, a burst of laughter, the scrape of a chair. I felt something inside me go from cold to white-hot, not the wild kind of anger that makes you stupid, the clear kind that makes you brave. "Come on," I said. "We're done playing their games." The door was locked. Of course it was. I knocked once, firm. No answer. I knocked again. More laughter, and then a hush. The deadbolt clicked, then stopped, like someone had started to unlock and changed their mind. I put my hand on the handle. I told Ethan to stand behind me. I drew a breath and set my boot beside the latch and drove forward with my weight. The door gave with a crack of splintered wood, swung wide, and banged into the wall. Warmth and noise spilled out. The table was set like a magazine, white cloth, candles, and crystal. People frozen in surprise, forks and glasses suspended. Rick stood at the head, carving knife in his hand, a swollen pride in his stance that withered as he saw me and the boy. Karen's face drained of color, then flushed red. A little girl peeked from behind a chair, eyes wide. "Have you lost your mind?" Karen said, but her voice trembled. I didn't look at her. I looked at Rick. "He was outside," I said, "in the cold." "For how long?" Rick shrugged, eyes sliding to the guests as if they were his jury and he could charm them. "He needed discipline," he said. "Kids today need consequences. He ruined the meal." I stepped forward so the heat of the room hit the snow still clinging to my shoes. "He's 18. He's family. He's not a dog you leave on the porch." A few guests looked down. One coughed. Karen folded her arms like armor. Rick smiled. A lazy thing. "My house, my rules," he said. Something moved then, quick and sharp. The new knife in his hand slammed down onto the table with a clatter that sent a candle toppling and a wineglass skittering. Red spread across the cloth like a wound. "And you," he snapped at Ethan, "will not speak unless spoken to. Do you understand me?" The room flinched. Ethan flinched. The sound cut through me more than the cold had. It wasn't only the danger of the blade. It was the way Rick used it, like a gavel, as if he alone could declare what was true. He wasn't disciplining. He was silent. He was saying the boy's voice did not count. He was saying mine didn't either. I planted my feet. I let the silence hold until the house itself seemed to lean in. "You don't get to erase him," I said. I kept my voice calm. Calm is louder than shouting if you do it right. "You don't get to erase me. You don't get to erase this house's rules, respect, safety, family." Karen tried again, softer, as if softness could hide a knife. "Dad, please, you're making a scene." "Good," I said. "Scenes make truth visible." Rick laughed then, a short bark, and rolled his shoulders like a man preparing to lift something heavy. "You kicked my door," he said. "You'll pay for that." I took my leather folder from under my arm and set it on the sideboard. I unzipped it slowly, so everybody watched my hands. I laid out the deed. I laid out the ID. I laid out a copy of Thompson's letter about the account hold, not because it belonged on a Thanksgiving table, but because the table was exactly where jokes ended. "You're right," I said. "I will pay for the door and anything my grandson needs to warm up, including a doctor if he shows signs of hypothermia. What I won't pay for is your arrogance. I won't pay with my house. I won't pay with my silence." Karen reached for the papers like she could snatch the words off them. I put my hand down, palm gentle but firm, like settling a skittish horse. "Don't," I said. Her lips pressed tight. "You don't understand," she said. "You don't understand how hard it is to keep everything together. Mortgages, bills, we were only trying to—" "Mortgages," I said, and pointed to the satisfaction letter. "Paid, years ago, by me. Bills paid by me." And 40 winters I cleared that driveway without help. This isn't about hard. This is about as easy. The easy money you saw in your eyes when you pictured a $600,000 check with your signature on it. A guest stood and mumbled something about needing to make a call. Another fidgeted with a napkin. The smell of turkey and thyme hung thick and somehow bitter. Rick picked up the knife again, not to threaten, but to feel in his hand what he believed was still his power. He leveled his gaze at me. "Get out," he said. "Take your little show and get out." Ethan took a small step closer, the coat still around his shoulders. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was the truest thing in the room. I angled my body so I was between him and Rick without making a scene of it. "No," I said. "We're leaving on our terms. And first, Ethan is going upstairs to get what he needs. Clothes, schoolwork, anything that's his." Karen's eyes darted to Rick. She wanted permission. That was the rot at the center of this. Not just his dominance, but her surrender to it. "He can't," Rick said. "He stays until he apologizes." "For what?" I asked. "Burning a turkey?" I let the words hang. "For breathing? For being a reminder that you cannot mold everyone into your image of obedience?" I shook my head. "He's going up. Now." Rick took a step forward, not big, just enough to make a point. I did not move. I did not blink. When men like him meet a wall that doesn't move, they sometimes remember how to go around it. Not today. He sneered. "You think you've got it all figured out, old man," he said. "I have enough figured out," I said. "Enough to freeze the $200,000 you plan to manage. Enough to prove the house is mine, and only mine. Enough to call the police if you try to stop us." There it was, the word that changes anyone. Police. It passed across faces like a draft under a door. Karen swallowed. A guest set down a fork. The little girl ducked away. Rick tried to look amused, but his jaw clicked. I nodded to Ethan. "Go," I said. He moved. He moved with that careful speed of someone used to being punished for moving fast. Up the stairs, down the hall. I waited. I stared at Rick's knife, then at his eyes, then at the spot beyond him where Martha would have stood with her chin up if she were here. I could almost hear her voice. "Keep your spine. Keep your kindness. Don't confuse them." Ethan came back with a duffel bag and a small stack of notebooks under his arm. He had tucked my coat tight around his chest. I took the bag and slung it over my shoulder. We stepped to the door. I paused at the threshold. "One more thing," I said, not for drama, but because truth deserves a full stop. "If you ever lock him outside again, if you ever raise a hand or a threat, I will make calls you can't charm your way out of. The world is full of doors. Today, I kicked yours. Next time, the law will." Rick's mouth opened. He didn't find a sentence. The knife lay on the china like a wrong answer. Karen's eyes shone, but not with tears that might cleanse, with anger that might scorch. I turned. The cold hit like a clean cloth on a fevered brow. The porch creaked under our boots. The street was quiet, the kind of holiday quiet where even dogs seem to understand something solemn is supposed to be happening. We got in the truck. I turned the heater up. Ethan held his hands out to the vents. "Thank you," he said, almost soundless. "We're not done," I said. "But we started." My phone buzzed. A text from Thompson, short and surgical. "Hold confirmed. Call when safe." I typed back, "Safe. Preparing next step." My fingers did not shake. We drove. The wipers beat a time I could keep. I didn't talk much, because sometimes silence is the best blanket you can offer. At a stoplight, I looked at Ethan's profile, thin and determined. I thought of 18-year-old me. I thought of all the grown men I knew who never truly got to be boys because someone told them their voice didn't matter. I made a small promise, not out loud, but binding all the same. Not in my house. Back home, I shepherded him to the living room and wrapped him in Martha's quilt. He held it the way children hold things that smell like safety. I made tea. I checked his fingers and toes for color because that's what you do when the cold has had its way with someone you love. He asked if he could shower. I told him to take as long as he wanted. I laid his duffel next to the bathroom door and sat in the hall while the water ran, just to hear the sound of warmth doing its work. When he was done, he looked taller. Hope will do that to a person. He sat on the couch and fell asleep in minutes, his body finally allowed to stop bracing. I went back to the kitchen table and opened the folder again. I added a note on yellow paper. Photographed porch, timeline 3:05 p.m. to 3:25 p.m. Boy outside, underdressed, visible shivering. I hadn't taken photos at the moment. I had chosen action, but I wrote the details while they were still hot because I knew we'd need them when the time came to make a record that would stand. I set the note under the deed and smoothed the edge. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text from Karen. "You went too far." Then another. "We'll fix this. Come back and apologize." Then another, colder. "You have no idea what you've started." I did know. That was the point. I stood and stretched my back, which complained the way old backs do after lifting a duffel and a door. I walked to the mantel and straightened Martha's photo. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that contains a decision. I spoke to the empty room as if it were a witness. "They think I'm weak," I said. I let the syllables be slow and heavy, like a judge putting down a gavel. But they're about to learn their mistake. I tapped the folder with 2 fingers. I have what I need. Outside, snow began to fall for real, thick flakes that made the streetlights into halos. I watched them for a while, steady as breath. Then I picked up the phone and typed one more message to Thompson. "Tomorrow, we move." If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. Morning came gray and thin, the kind of light that makes a house feel older than it is. I stood at the sink and watched steam rise off my coffee, the curl of it soft against the window pane. Martha's photo leaned against the sugar jar, her eyes bright the way they always were when she believed I could do hard things. I told her quietly that today I would. I opened the leather folder and fanned the documents across the kitchen table. The deed is in my name. The mortgage satisfaction letter, copies of tax receipts. Thompson's email had language I could read without a dictionary. I traced the bold letters like a man reading his own name on a ship's hull. This was the plan made solid. This was the ground under my feet. At 9, I drove to Thompson's office to sign what needed signing. The building had dark wood down the hallway and that faint smell of toner and old books. He met me at the door with a steady hand and no fuss. We sat in a conference room with a long table and a window that looked over the square. He slid 2 envelopes across to me. One was addressed to Karen and Rick, one to the bank, a hard copy of what we had already done by phone. He spoke in plain words, each one a rung on a ladder. Protective notice, elder financial exploitation, an affidavit stating sole ownership of the home at fair market value, around $600,000. A certified copy of the deed, a statement of the administrative hold on the $200,000 joint account. He had highlighted lines I could point to, even in a storm. "Frank," he said, "we're not picking a fight. We are documenting facts. If they are reasonable, this ends with clarity. If they are not, the record is our spine. Today, we serve these." I signed where he asked, one signature at a time, no shaking. He notarized, slid papers into a rigid mailer. Then, instead of sending a courier, he looked at me and asked, "Would you like to hand them over yourself, with me present?" I understood what he was really asking. "Are you ready to be the man in the room when truth arrives?" I nodded. My voice came out steady. "Yes." We drove separately to my house because I wanted my truck in the driveway. I wanted the place where Martha's plant still slept under the frost to be the stage where this turned. Thompson walked in with his briefcase and a calm that made the walls feel taller. We set the envelopes on the coffee table next to Martha's quilt, folded neatly where Ethan had slept. The house hummed with the heater and the clock. Then came the knock. Not a neighbor's gentle knock, the flat official sound of knuckles that expect doors to open. I answered. 2 police officers stood on the porch, hats low against the cold. Behind them, further back, were Karen and Rick. My daughter's jaw was set. Rick's arms were spread, palms out like a man about to deliver a sermon he wrote for himself. The lead officer introduced himself as Miller. He asked if we could speak inside, out of the wind. I stepped back and let them in. Thompson stood as we entered, introduced himself, then sat again. His briefcase was open, the edges of documents straight like a carpenter's sight line. "Mr. Burke," Officer Miller said, "we received a call from your son-in-law alleging that you removed his stepson from his home last night without permission and damaged the front door. We're here to get everyone's account." "Of course," I said. "Please sit." My living room has 2 armchairs and a long couch. I took one chair. Thompson sat in the other. The officers sat on the couch. Karen and Rick hovered until Officer Miller gestured to the remaining space, a quiet command that made Rick smirk and sit slowly, like he only obeyed if he could make a show of it. I did not begin with speeches. I began with facts. I arrived at my daughter's house yesterday and found my grandson Ethan sitting on the front steps in sub-freezing weather with no coat. He told me he had been locked out for hours. I brought him here to warm up. I will pay for the damage to the door. Rick barked out a laugh. He forgot to mention the part where the boy ruined Thanksgiving and needed to learn responsibility. Karen put a hand on Rick's sleeve, a polite hush that didn't have any real softness in it. "Dad," she said, "this is not how we wanted to do this. You're making everything harder." Thompson cleared his throat softly, and I felt the room tilt toward the documents. Before we go further, he said, Mr. Burke would like to place several items on the record. He opened the briefcase and laid the deed, the satisfaction letter, and the bank notice on the table. He slid copies toward the officers so no one had to reach. Officer Miller read. He did not rush. He tapped the deed with one finger, a quiet metronome. So the home at Maple Grove is not the one in question, he said, and this house, your current residence, is yours alone. That's right, I said, but there is a financial matter that intersects with why they want me out of my house. I pointed to the bank letter. A joint account my daughter convinced me to open a while back has been frozen. $200,000. The bank confirmed a hold for suspicious activity, pending my authorization for any movement. Rick shifted, the couch sighing under him. We were trying to ensure his care. He forgets things. He leaves the stove on. I cooked dinner last night, I said. No smoke, no burns. Then I looked at Officer Miller, not at my daughter, not at the man who had learned to use charm like a leash. The account is frozen. The house is mine. But this is not even why we're here. We're here because a boy was left outside in the cold. Miller nodded. Where is Ethan now? Upstairs, I said. Warm, asleep. May we speak with him? You may, I said, but let me tell him first. He has been spoken over enough. I went up the stairs and called up gently. He came down in socks and a sweatshirt, hair damp from the shower, eyes clearer than they had been last night. He sat on the edge of the armchair, hands clasped together. Officer Miller introduced himself and asked simple questions. No traps, no hurry. Ethan's voice was quiet at first, then steadier. I burned the turkey, he said. Rick told me to sit outside and think. He locked the door. I wasn't allowed back in. It started around 11. How long? Miller asked. Until my grandpa came, Ethan said. After 3. He pulled the cuff of his sleeve back a little, then stopped, embarrassed. May I look? Miller asked. Ethan nodded. The officer leaned in and examined the reddened skin on Ethan's wrist where cold had chewed its way in. He looked at the boy's cheeks, still dry-chapped. He wrote notes, slow and legible. He asked if this had happened before. Ethan glanced at Karen and then at Rick. He swallowed. Yes, he said. Sleeping in the garage when I forgot to take out the trash. 2 nights in the basement once. No lights. Rick stood up fast, hands out, as if to bless or to stop a train. That's not abuse, he said. That's parenting. The boy lies to get sympathy. He is dramatic. He has to learn consequences. Do you know how much money I spend on that kid? He reached into his messenger bag, the kind men carry when they want to look important, and pulled out a thick clip of receipts. Grocery store, school supplies, and a sports registration fee. He tossed them onto my coffee table like cards, all edges and noise. $12,000 in the last 18 months, he said, jabbing a finger at the pile. Food, clothes, gas, my house, my rules. I pay, I decide. Something in me went very still, not from fear, from recognition. I had spent decades on factory floors where men like him shouted numbers and called it proof. I had learned that numbers can be used like a cudgel when you ignore people. I folded my hands and looked at the receipts as if they were harmless paper. Because they were. Thompson leaned forward with that lawyer's patience that makes a room hush. Officer, he said, the expenses of a step-parent, even if accurate, do not confer the right to endanger a child or bar him from entry, nor do they grant guardianship or ownership. These are voluntary household expenses. They do not justify coercive isolation. They do not negate what the law calls the duty of care. He turned to Miller and slid another sheet across. This is a printout of the state statute regarding child endangerment and unlawful restraint. It explicitly includes exposure to extreme weather as a form of harm. Rick laughed again, but the sound had too much metal in it now. You lawyers love your paper, he said. Miller did not laugh. He set the statute beside his notes. Mr. Green, he said, Did you instruct the young man to remain outside in sub-freezing temperatures for multiple hours yesterday?" Rick lifted his chin. "I told him he wasn't welcome at the table until he understood respect. If he wanted to stand outside pouting, that's on him." "He says you locked the door," Miller said. Rick's mouth stretched flat. "My house is always locked." Karen spoke for the first time in a voice so small I almost missed it. "Rick," she said, not a warning this time, a plea. Miller looked at her. "Ma'am," he said, "did you lock the door?" She did not answer right away. She pressed her fingers together, stared at her wedding ring like it could tell her what to say, then lifted her eyes to me, not to Rick, not to the officers. "Yes," she whispered. "We locked it. We kept it locked." The room tilted. Not because I didn't know, because truth still has weight when it finally lands. Rick spun toward her, his face pinched with a mix of shock and contempt. "You don't speak for us," he hissed. "I am speaking for me," she said, barely louder than a breath. "And for my son. He was freezing." In the long quiet that followed, the house remembered how to breathe. The radiator ticked. The clock ticked. Miller folded his notebook and stood. He turned to Rick. "Sir, please stand and place your hands behind your back." "What?" Rick barked. "For what? For disciplining a teenager?" His voice cracked in the middle of a word he tried to make strong. He looked at the officers like a man looks at a mirror that refuses to give back the image he wants. "Child endangerment and unlawful restraint," Miller said. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." He spoke the rest of the words we all know from 100 shows, but they sounded different here, in my living room, where Martha's quilt sat folded and Ethan's socks were damp from a spill he hadn't noticed yet. Rick yanked his arms away. Officer Daniels stepped closer, not aggressive, just close enough to make refusal look foolish. The cuffs clicked. That sound was not a victory cheer. It was a door closing on a room we needed to stop visiting. Rick tried to twist his mouth into a smile and failed. "You'll regret this," he said to me. "All of you. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I do," I said softly. "I'm dealing with a man who left a boy outside in the cold and called it love." Miller guided Rick toward the door. Karen rose halfway, then sank back down, her hands limp in her lap. She wasn't crying. She looked empty, like someone pulled a plug and all the bright water ran out. She stared at the pile of receipts as if they could reassemble themselves into something noble. They could not. Ethan stared at his shoes. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He looked like a person who had been holding his breath for so long that he had forgotten how to inhale without shaking. When the officers stepped onto the porch with Rick, the air changed. The room relaxed the way a field does after a storm passes, and you realize the barn is still standing. Thompson gathered the documents into a neat stack, his movements slow and exact. He handed Karen the envelope with her name on it. "This is a formal notice," he said. "It outlines the status of Mr. Burke's property and finances. It also includes contact information for me, should you wish to discuss any of it with council present." She took the envelope, her fingers barely closed around it. "I didn't want this," she said, and for the first time, it almost sounded like the Karen I used to know, the girl who cried at sad movies and laughed with her whole face. I wanted peace. Peace that cost someone else their dignity," I said, "isn't peace. It's quite cruel." She flinched. She did not argue. She stood and walked to the door as if her shoes weighed more than her body. On the porch, the cold air slapped color into her cheeks. Miller had settled Rick into the back of the patrol car. She watched for a second and then looked down at her hands. "What happens now?" she asked without turning around. "Now," I said, "we tell the truth to people who can do something about it." I didn't say it like a threat. I said it like a recipe. There will be reports. There may be charges. There will be a different future for Ethan. "I can fix this," she said, as if the words could rewind the day. "You can face it," I said. That is the only fix that works. She pressed the envelope to her chest. She did not look back when she walked down the steps. The patrol car's lights spun once, red and blue painting the snow with brief stripes, and then the car rolled away with the quiet hum of winter tires. The street fell still. The sky opened a little, a lighter gray on a darker gray, like hope behind grief. Inside, Ethan stood by the window and watched the taillights fade. He didn't move until the car turned the corner. Then he turned to me with a look that made me think of the first day he stood on his own 2 feet without 2 adult hands hovering next to him. "Is it over?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, "but the worst part is ending." We ate grilled cheese at the kitchen table because big meals felt wrong in a house that had just witnessed a small war. Thompson stayed. He drank coffee without sugar and made 2 calls from the porch, his breath fogging in front of him. When he came back inside, he briefed me like a coach talks to a team at halftime. "Miller will file," he said. "A report. There will be a hearing for a temporary protective order, and the district attorney will review the endangerment charges. I'll email you the times. As for the property, the certified copies are logged. If anyone attempts to file a transfer, the county recorder will ping us." "Will they try?" I asked. "They might," he said. "People do strange things at the edge of losing, but paper is patient. Paper waits, and this paper is solid." I thanked him. He gathered his things and paused in the doorway. "Frank," he said, "what you did last night and today, rescue, records, restraint, that is how people keep their lives. Not with fury, with facts." He touched the brim of an imaginary cap for Ethan, an old-fashioned gesture that made the boy smile for the first time all day. And then he was gone, his tail lights disappearing into the thin afternoon. The house felt different, not lighter, not yet, just honest. I washed the dishes with water hotter than it needed to be and watched steam soak into the space above the sink. The sun tried and failed to punch through the cloud cover. I thought about Rick's receipts, the way they lay spread on my coffee table like a brag turned into evidence of something else. I collected them and put them in a manila folder labeled with today's date. You never know what will matter to a judge or a caseworker. You never know what number tells a story you didn't mean to tell. The phone buzzed twice and went quiet. I didn't check it. I sat in my chair and let my body remember that sitting can be resting, not waiting for a blow. Ethan dozed on the couch. Martha's quilt pulled up to his shoulders. Quiet filled the corners. The floor creaked like old knees climbing stairs. My hands found the grooves in the armrests where years of fingers had polished the wood smooth. I felt old. I also felt strong. Both things can be true at once. Near dusk, there was another knock. Not official this time. Karen stood on the porch alone. Her eyes were wet but not wild. She held the envelope back out to me as if giving it back could bless her. I did not take it. "It's yours," I said. "Read it. Know it. If you want to talk, call Thompson." "I don't want lawyers between us," she said. "Then you should have kept lawyers out of it by keeping decency in it," I said. I kept my voice quiet. Kindness and boundaries can share a sentence. "I told them you were confused," she said. "I told everyone you were confused." "I was hurt," I said, "not confused." She looked past me at the stairs as if she could see Ethan breathing in my living room. "He makes everything hard," she said, like a person repeating a line that once sounded like truth and now sounds like something a bully taught her to say. "Hard is not the enemy," I said. "Cruel is." She took a step back. "This isn't over," she said. "No," I said. "It isn't." She waited, maybe for me to ask her in, maybe for me to reach out and undo the day. I did not. She turned and walked toward the street. The sky was a soft iron. The first star never shows on nights like this. It hides and waits for cleaner air. I closed the door and leaned against it. I could feel the cold on the other side, like a living thing. I went to the mantel and put my hand on Martha's photo. "We did it," I whispered. "At least this part. He is warm. The money is safe. The house will hold." Her smile in the picture did not change, but something in me settled like a stone finding its bed in a river. I breathed. I listened to the house breathe with me. Later, Officer Miller called. His voice was formal but warmer than before, like a man who has seen too many bad outcomes and enjoys delivering a decent one. "Mr. Burke," he said, "Mr. Green was processed and released on bond. A no-contact provision has been added. If he shows up, call us. The report includes the temperatures from yesterday and the timeline. We also noted your documentation regarding property and finances. Keep those handy." "I will," I said. "Thank you." He paused. "You did right by the kid," he said, then cleared his throat. "Good night." After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a list. I have always trusted lists more than moods. Call the college counselor for Ethan. Ask Delgado at the bank to add a second layer of alerts. Change the locks tomorrow morning because even a man who never tries a door deserves not to find it unlocked. Schedule an appointment with my doctor because stress is a weather system too. Put copies of everything in the fire safe. Underline the line in Thompson's notice that states clearly in plain black text that the home is valued at approximately $600,000 and is not subject to any other claim. That line is the backbone of a house in a single sentence. I lit the small lamp Martha loved and turned off the overheads. Warm pockets of light make a home feel like it knows where to hold you. Ethan stirred and sat up, hair wild on one side, eyes puffy with real sleep. "Is he gone?" he asked. "He's gone," I said. "Will he come back?" he asked. "Not tonight," I said. "And if he tries another night, he will meet people who do not accept excuses." He nodded. He didn't smile. The body remembers. It takes time to teach new songs. When he went back to sleep, I stepped outside onto the porch. The air was glass. Breath rose and broke. The street was empty except for the soft hiss of someone's heater vent on the other side. I looked at the spot where the patrol car had idled. I looked at the sky and found no stars, but found, in their place, a space where stars might decide to appear. I thought of the envelopes, of the weight of paper, of the way a signature is both a promise and a shield. I thought, too, of one more thing I had not told anyone yet. Not Thompson, not the officers, not even Ethan. The last card. The one Martha and I had discussed years ago and folded into our plans like a note inside a quilt. Not for leverage, for peace, for teaching, for what comes after fury has finished its work. They don't know I still have it. They don't know what it can do. It's not a threat. It's a compass. I went back inside and locked the door. I checked the windows. I turned off the lamp and left the mantel light burning, the one that makes her picture glow. I lay down on the couch and listened to the old heater breathe. My eyes closed. My body let go of the day in pieces. Before sleep took me, I set it into the dark so I would hear it as I drifted. Tomorrow, we move again, and this time, we move toward quiet that isn't cruel. Feeling unseen and dismissed is hard, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves justice and to be truly seen, comment, "Justice." Now watch what they do to change that. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The snow had nearly melted by the time the papers came back from the courthouse, crisp and final. Thompson handed me the stamped copies across his oak desk, his voice calm but carrying weight. "It's done, Frank," he said. "The house is yours, entirely, permanently. No transfer, no lien, no claim can touch it now." I let my hands rest on the documents a moment longer than needed. For weeks I had carried the fear that my own roof might be taken from over my head. Now, with the bold black seal at the bottom of the page, that fear was gone. I could almost hear Martha whisper, "Stand tall, Frank. This is your ground." I didn't stop there. I took a portion of the savings, $100,000 from what I had worked for all my life, and transferred it into the Martha Foundation, a small scholarship fund I had started in her name years back. I wanted her kindness to keep breathing in the world, even if she was no longer here to guide it. When the bank teller handed me the confirmation slip, I held it like a promise. The number on the page wasn't just money. It was a memory made useful. A week later, Karen called. Her voice cracked on the second word, and I knew she had been crying. She asked to come by. Against Thompson's advice, I said yes. She stood on the porch with red eyes and trembling hands, holding nothing but regret. "Dad," she said, "I was wrong. Rick pushed me, but I went along with it. Please, forgive me. Can we put this behind us?" I looked at her long and hard. Once her face had been my source of pride, the young girl with scraped knees who ran to me for comfort, but now she was a grown woman who had nearly thrown me into the cold for the sake of money that was never hers. My heart ached, yet my words came steady. "Karen," I said, "you chose your path. You knew the weight of it. Forgiveness isn't a door you can knock on after burning down the house. You'll have to live with the smoke." She wept, but I didn't step closer. I couldn't. Ethan, though, became my anchor. The court granted me guardianship, and for the first time in years, the boy had a safe place to lay his head. He brought his duffel bags to my house one Saturday morning and unpacked them slowly, as if afraid someone might tell him to pack again. But no one did. He set his books on the shelf, and for once they stayed there. A month later, he received a letter from the university. 4 years, tuition covered, a scholarship worth $72,000. I watched his eyes fill with disbelief as he read it aloud. He clutched the letter like it was a golden ticket. "Grandpa," he said, his voice breaking, "I can really go." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Yes, son, you can go as far as you want. No one can lock you out anymore." As for Rick, the fall was swift. His job let him go after the charges surfaced. Parents at Ethan's school whispered in hallways, and neighbors stopped waving from their porches. He was no longer a man with power. He was a man others crossed the street to avoid. I heard through Thompson that Rick now rented a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, walls stained, the rent cheap enough to remind him every day of what he'd lost. Pride had once been his currency, but now even that was bankrupt. Life for me slowed into something quieter, something truer. I tended the garden Martha had loved, kneeling in the soil with gloves she once wore, planting flowers that would bloom in colors she favored. Daisies for her laughter, lilies for her grace, roses because she always said they were proof beauty could live beside thorns. Each morning I watered them, not just with the hose, but with my attention, and in return they gave me peace. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a sanctuary. I learned to live simply again. Black coffee at sunrise, walking with Ethan in the evenings, listening to him talk about classes he dreamed of taking, fixing a squeaky hinge with the same satisfaction I once found in bigger victories. Freedom didn't arrive like a trumpet blast. It arrived like a steady breath, the kind you didn't realize you had been holding for years. One night, sitting on the porch with the cicadas buzzing in the dark, I whispered to myself, "I don't need them anymore. I have myself. And that's enough." The contrast between our lives couldn't have been sharper. I had my home, my peace, my grandson's trust. Rick had walls that smelled of mildew and silence that echoed louder than his old bragging ever did. Karen tried to call again, but I didn't answer. A boundary once broken had to be drawn in stone. I told Thompson to handle any messages. Blood may be blood, but respect is thicker. Looking back, I see it clearly. The real inheritance isn't money or property. It's dignity. It's justice. Those who try to buy it with lies always end up bankrupt. Those who defend it, no matter how battered, end up rich in ways no account statement can capture. My victory wasn't only the house or the frozen bank account. My victory was finding peace where betrayal had tried to root itself. The lesson is simple, yet it took me 67 years to say it plain. Self-respect and justice matter more than blood ties. If someone betrays you, it is not unkind to draw a line. It is survival. It is wisdom. It is the only way the heart can keep beating without breaking. Now, as I sit in the backyard watching Ethan sketch plans for his future, I feel something I thought I'd lost forever: hope. He will carry forward not just the scholarship money, not just the lessons of books, but the lesson of standing firm when others try to strip you bare. That lesson is worth more than the house, more than the savings, more than all of it. Still, life has a way of opening new doors even when old ones slam shut. At church last Sunday, a neighbor told me about a community project needing volunteers, building raised garden beds for families without yards. I felt Martha smiling through the thought. Maybe that's where I'll put my hands next, in soil that feeds others, not just me. A small act, but one that keeps dignity alive. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know this: betrayal no longer owns me. Fear no longer guides me. The house is mine, the garden is alive, and my grandson is free to dream. That's enough. That's more than enough. And as I close this chapter of my life, I can feel the next one waiting, softer, brighter, ready to be written not with anger, but with peace. The mornings in my house feel different now. The air is lighter, the room's quieter, not from absence, but from peace. For the first time in years, I can sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, listening to the birds outside, and not feel a storm pressing against the walls. The house, once a battlefield of whispers and betrayal, has returned to what it was always meant to be: a home. I walk down the hallway, hand brushing against the old photographs, and instead of pain, I feel a sense of steadiness. This is mine, this is safe, and no one can ever take it away again. Ethan has settled into his college life, but he comes home on weekends whenever he can. The first time he walked through the door after his semester began, he dropped his backpack on the floor, grinned, and said, "Hey, Dad." Not Grandpa. Dad. That single word filled the room with something I can't put into dollars or deeds. It was worth more than the scholarship, more than the house itself. It was trust being rebuilt, brick by brick, in a boy who had once been treated as if he were disposable. When he sits at the table now, telling me about his classes, his new friends, or how he plans to join a debate team, I see a young man who is free, and I feel pride that I was able to give him that freedom. Karen sent me a letter last month. The handwriting was shaky, the envelope smudged with tears, I imagine. She wrote of regret, of sleepless nights, of realizing too late what she had nearly destroyed. She begged for forgiveness, said she wanted another chance to be my daughter again. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, unopened after the first reading. I did not write back. Standing at the window that night, I whispered into the quiet, "I don't need their apologies. I have my life. I have myself." And in that silence, I felt Martha with me again, nodding in agreement. Instead of dwelling on what was broken, I turned my hands to building. I joined a local charity group that plants trees along the town's walking trails and sets up small scholarships for students who, like Ethan once was, don't see a path forward. Digging into the soil with other volunteers, feeling the sun on my back, I found a new rhythm. It reminded me of my younger days, when work was honest and straightforward, when effort brought growth you could see with your own eyes. Watching a young family accept a scholarship check or a child watering a sapling we had planted, I felt Martha's legacy stretching far beyond these walls. It was more than healing, it was purpose. Through all this, I held on to the lessons that pain had carved into me. For parents, I have learned that we must set boundaries even with those we love most. Love without boundaries is not love, it is surrender. Protecting what you've built, whether it's a home worth $600,000 or simply your dignity, is not selfish. It is your responsibility, your final gift to yourself and to the ones who truly value it. For children, I have learned that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to regain. Betrayal does not just cut the parent, it leaves scars on the betrayer too, scars that no apology can erase. And for people living in this modern world, where everything feels like it can be bought or sold, I have learned that self-respect and integrity are the only possessions that never lose value. Money can vanish, houses can fall, but character remains, or it collapses, depending on the choices you make. Rick's fate drifted back to me through neighbors and old acquaintances. He still lives in that cramped apartment on the edge of town, working odd jobs to make ends meet. His name, once spoken with authority, now comes up only in whispers of pity or disgust. He tried to call once, though Thompson intercepted it. No doubt he wanted to justify himself, to remind me of the $12,000 he claimed as proof of his right to control Ethan's life, as though children could be reduced to receipts. But I no longer answer his voice. It belongs to the past, and the past has no authority here. One small surprise came to me in early spring. A package arrived at my door, simple brown paper with no return address. Inside was a small wooden box, carved with clumsy hands but filled with care. It was Ethan's project from shop class. Inside, he had placed a folded note. "Thank you for giving me a chance to grow. I'll make you proud." I held that box for a long time, longer than I thought I could. It was proof that love, when nurtured, could heal even after storms. Proof that not all bonds are broken beyond repair. Some can be rebuilt stronger, not because of blood, but because of choice. Now my days follow a gentle rhythm. In the mornings, I water the garden where Martha's flowers bloom in defiance of every dark season we've endured. In the afternoons, I meet with the charity board, deciding how best to use the funds from the Martha Foundation to help the next student, the next dreamer. And in the evenings, I sit on the porch with a glass of iced tea, watching the sun melt into the horizon. Each petal that opens in the garden, each tree that takes root in town, reminds me that life goes on, not as it was, but as it should be. I've come to accept that Karen may never truly return to me. That is her path to walk, her lesson to learn. And though part of me will always ache for the girl who once held my hand at the fair, I know now that longing cannot rebuild what she tore apart. My forgiveness lies not in words to her, but in the life I live without her shadows. And so I sit here in the quiet glow of late afternoon, looking out at the garden Martha and I once planted. The roses are full and red, the daisies swaying with the breeze, and the lilies standing tall. I smile and say softly, "Every day is proof that I chose right." The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.